What's up guys, I'm the Viking. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hello, how's it going? So at this point of my time off work, I had hoped to have gone out and shot at a couple of haunted locations I was planning and gone on a ghost tour. However, the weather has worked massively against me and everything I've tried to do has had to be cancelled because it's been rained off. So with Mental Health Awareness Day happening last week, I thought it'd be a cool idea to have a bit of a look into mental health and Halloween and see how the two have been interlinked over the years. And when you go way back to the beginnings of Halloween, back when it was a pagan festival, people with mental health issues and learning difficulties weren't seen so much as being that hugely bad in the community as they did in later years, which I'll get onto in a minute. They were seen as oracles and in communication with the gods and the other beings from other realms, and they were praised and they were put into positions of power. Do I think that's a good idea? Probably not, but at least they weren't being burnt at the stake. So you bring the pagan festival forward, it's amalgamated with the Celts, and eventually it's overtaken by Christianity as Christian leaders attempt to take over everything as is their wont. All Hallows Eve becomes this time when all of the evil in the world is out there and coming for you and gonna get you. And that's where you get the ideas of demons and the paranormal and the preternatural, all those sort of things coming together, banging heads, and eventually you get onto the point where people are accusing each other of witchcraft. You're just coming out of the Middle Ages and all of a sudden mentally ill people with things such as schizophrenia are seen as cursing families and taking away their children, replacing them with monsters, which at the age of around 2 or 3, maybe that was autism and they didn't know any better because it was 1592 or whatever. Just saying, you know, kind of linked together. You take mental illness, you take specific learning difficulties, you take a group of people who don't know anything about the science of mental health and the science of the way the brain works and the brain operates, and then you mix that in with a healthy dose of extreme religious following, and all of a sudden you have things like the Salem witch trials where people are being burnt at the stake. Personally, looking into it, I think that's probably the way things work. I think that a lot of these sort of curses came about because these communities were so small, and when things like this happen to interconnect, all of a sudden you can't explain it any other way other than it's evil and witchcraft, or it's summoning demons to take away people's souls, when in actual fact it's people having a mental health crisis who needed help but they didn't know any better. But why am I talking about this sort of thing? Well, with it being World Mental Health Day, I've been thinking a lot about how modern Halloween and mental health issues come together. And around this time, you know, you've got your usual things of people decrying wearing the sort of straight jackets and things of that nature, you know, the classic mad person Halloween costume. I agree with that. I don't think that's particularly acceptable. I do think that things of that nature are kind of insensitive and shouldn't really be done these days. You know, I look back at my own mental health journey, the time I spent in a mental health institution, for lack of a better term. Last year, you know, I spent 4 months in a mental health hospital recovering from a severe bout of depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, possibly some other stuff as well, and you know, that's developed other things that may become an issue in the future. And I'm very much aware that had I been born, you know, 100 years in the past, I'd have probably ended up in a padded room, I'd have probably ended up having electroshock therapy, or I'd end up having a lobotomy or things of that nature. You know, it's not something that is very nice to dwell on for people with mental health issues. It's something that sometimes pops up in the back of your mind and you're like, oh good, thank goodness it's 2019 and that didn't happen to me. So maybe, just maybe, it's time that people stopped doing those kind of costumes and started doing something a bit more creative. I mean, there's a whole world of horror monsters that they could do out there. And when you look at sort of the classic horror movies, you can kind of link everything together with mental health issues. You know, there's always the mad scientist, there's always the, you know, the crazy person in those kind of films. It's always like a psychotic killer. As far forward as we are with our thinking these days, there is still very much this taboo around mental illness, and I think a lot of it stems from horror films, from the fear that has been instilled for hundreds of years into people about becoming mentally ill or being around people who are mentally ill. And as someone who is mentally ill and someone who has a lot of friends who are mentally ill, I don't think that's always 100% the case. I think that a lot of the time it's overblown. I think a lot of the time it's unfounded, and a lot of the time it's still kind of mocked in a way. So what I'm saying is, enjoy Halloween, but maybe think a bit when you're coming up with a costume. If you're going to a party, don't just go for the easy crazy person or, you know, the mad scientist. Try something more creative. That's just my thoughts on Halloween and the link that Halloween has with the mentally ill. Maybe I'm wrong. If you think I'm wrong, why not leave a comment down below, explain why you think that maybe I'm being overly sensitive and taking things a little bit too seriously. Or if you agree with me, maybe sound off and, you know, talk about your own experiences with how it's made you feel, and maybe we can work together to build awareness of this sort of thing and hopefully help people. But I don't know, I could be completely wrong. As I said earlier, I am planning on doing some ghost hunts and a ghost tour, but whether or not the weather's going to hold for me to do it is anyone's guess. I do have some ghost hunting tools. One of the tools that I have is my EMF reader. For those of you who've done ghost tours or have seen ghost hunting shows on the internet or on TV, you know how this works. You turn it on and it reads electrical signals, and if it starts to sort of waver up, maybe there's some sort of presence there. What I have learnt with this, trying it out around and about me, is that if there is any unshielded wiring, it freaks out. For example, in where I live, there are a couple of plugs that are attached to partition walls, and yeah, it freaks out as soon as it goes near them. Strange that, as it's, you know, designed for finding faults in electrical wiring and things. Spooky. But I've also bought this. Yep, I bought myself a Ouija board. I've always wanted one, I've always wanted to try one, and I've done a bit of experimenting with it, and so far, if that is to be believed, I can 100% say where I live is not haunted, because I sat with it for about an hour and 40 minutes the other day, asking questions and the usual ghost hunting stuff, and the only thing that I contacted was my will to live, as it told me it was slowly draining as I did it. So do I believe in the power of Ouija? We will see. Could just be that I don't live in a place that's haunted. It wouldn't surprise me, considering where I am. There's not really a whole lot of paranormal activity linked to where I live. But you go slightly further afield to Chester, and there's a lot apparently. I've done quite a few ghost tours, there's been quite a lot of sightings. You go on a lot of the UK paranormal websites, they have entire pages dedicated to just to Chester. So I'm probably going to pop down there one evening, take the Ouija board, take some of the other stuff that I've got, and see what I can find out, and maybe bring a bit of history to you as well, because I do know quite a lot of the history of the town from the years and years and years that I lived there. Now, I've been the Viking. As always, you've been awesome, and I will see you next week.